Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 285. Bloodlines 2. The blood is the life. It says so in the Bible.
I've yet to read it.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, Bloodbound. I'm Jeffrey W. Reinfeld.
And bathed in blood, I am Dracula. Michael.
Welcome back. For those of you who do not know, that's actually a quote from Dracula, sort of misappropriated by the show. So we'd like to thank Bram Stoker and the hair of Gary Oldman.
That
was like the worst part of that movie.
He had some crazy hair in that movie.
Yeah.
It was a good movie, though.
It was a good movie. I did enjoy the movie.
I saw that in the theaters. It was different. It was very different for stuff at the time. Had a lot of original things going on in it.
Yeah,
his armor, his battle armor was crazy.
Awesome. Like the laminate armor. Yes, that looked really cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. No, and to let everyone know, this episode's been planned for. We talked about it, I think, 3 episodes ago, or maybe 4.
Did we?
I think 3 ago. I just mentioned briefly at the end that we were going to do the last 2 episodes, and then, but it was like very briefly at the end of a recording, not on air, but right before we wrapped up. And then E3 happened, and I got super stoked on Cyberpunk 2077.
Stroked, maybe.
Strokered.
Strokered.
And so part of me really wanted to jump ship and go to Cyberpunk 2077 and talk about that. And talk about Cyberpunk.
We can do that.
But we will do that, just not this time.
You don't? Okay. Are you going to be okay with me like devolving a little bit to talk about Vlad Tepes, to like the real stuff?
Well, the real stuff or the real myth stuff, or
the real stuff. Like,
no,
not the myth, not the myth stuff, the real stuff.
Because part of the reason why this is exciting to me was years ago, when I got out of the service, Vampire the Masquerade was breaking on the scene, and I don't know what edition. Maybe it was 2nd edition was coming out. Maybe it was just 1st edition. I don't know.
Yeah, we played a lot of White Wolf back in the day. A lot
of White Wolves was very popular. And so
I mean, you and I specifically, a lot of our games that we first played together were White Wolf.
Were Vampire.
Yeah, mostly Vampire, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I never got into the other ones quite as much. I like them to, when I'm running, I prefer to run Vampire. For me, the political intrigue stuff is stuff I like anyway. There's always some of that in my games.
Werewolf was pretty good, and Mage was really good.
I know, especially Werewolf might have been as popular, maybe a little bit more, at least around where we were.
Really?
I don't know if it was more, but the people who were into it were more fanatical, I'll say. So I think more people played Vampire, but the Werewolf fans were more fanatical. And then the Mage fans might have even been, I don't know if more fanatical would be the correct word, but very dedicated and at least deeply loving of Mage, which is one of the.
I loved Mage. Such a good game.
And I've not followed White Wolf since that time. It's something where I like to play, but typically like to play in my own worlds. And White Wolf, it just doesn't work that way. It's all about World Darkness, which is a version of Earth.
White Wolf is interesting. They did such a good job crafting their world and making it cross-platform. And, by that, I mean, like over multiple games, it's the same game world.
Yeah.
And it really is that we know multiple writers that worked on it.
I definitely know one.
No, you know more than one.
I know more than one? Okay.
You don't realize. I forget who the other person is, but somebody that Dawn and I talked about one day. I was like, oh my gosh, that person wrote for White Wolf too? And yeah, you know them. Wish I could tell you. Wish I could remember who it was. off the top of my head, but I don't remember.
Well, we shouldn't give credit here because I don't know if they're on books. And I know sometimes
we should give credit.
I know sometimes female authors do not like to have their names attached to role-playing games because they're predominantly bought by men, and a lot of times they have male pen names that they use to attach to the work. So
I didn't know that,
and I don't know if that's true here or not. But yes, we definitely know at least one person who's a very good writer, and so yeah. But I didn't know them until way after my phase in Vampire, which I really liked. The World of Darkness is a very interesting world for game masters who like to torture players. And the irony is a lot of players who are attracted to the world love the idea of the power of vampires or werewolves or mages, which kind of misses a bit of the point of the game, which is sort of about there's a price to pay for those powers, and usually the players who play with me, they learned that lesson the hard way.
Same thing for like friends of mine I had a friend of mine who always kept a character just in case you pissed him off. He had this character at the ready to kind of slap you. And I think that's something that you used to do too, isn't it?
I don't know if I know there are certain characters that you would get slapped if you ran into. I don't think I ever held. I mean, maybe in various campaigns there was a character who popped up.
No, this was like a world consistent character. Like I had a friend of mine who he had a world consistent character that would pop up in case you really messed up. This was a character that would pop up and pull you out of the fire. And my other friend who was also a GM had a character that would pop up in case you pissed him off.
Well, I had one character who I had fun with. It was world consistent, and he always showed up, but it was not necessarily even important to stories. I think it was only important to one story ever, and that was the character Otto, which was based off of a character one of my friends actually made when I was in Germany. And it was a character he played based off of Kevin Kline's character from A Fish Called Wanda.
Great character.
And I had a very angry half-elf who the party actually loved interacting with, which was kind of funny because he was never good to them. Sometimes he was actually...
I don't know why you guys don't like him. He's actually miserable to you guys.
It's one of those things where it's kind of like the light and the bug zapping machines. Players get attracted to it even though they know they're going to get zapped if they get too close, which I think was the lure for some people. So but yeah, that was sort of my one character who was world prevalent that always kind of showed up. I had another Eric the Mage, which quite often was sought out by people, but he was kind of a Gandalf style character in my world, a powerful wizard who knew way too much. But kind of like Gandalf, he just kind of showed up whenever he wanted to, which was very rarely, and pretty much to get you going towards trouble.
But today we're talking about World of Darkness.
Talking about World of Darkness, not prevalent characters, and for a little bit, vampires are huge in the mythos, today, and really. From the modern era, it kind of goes back to one guy, and I think Michael wants to sidetrack on him for a few.
Yeah, let's take a second to acknowledge Vlad Tepes. I know I have forgotten more than probably most of you know about this man because I've read a couple of books, but it's been a long time because I was, a broody person when I was reading these books. That was a long, long time ago. Blah blah blah. So Vlad Tepes, who you know and think of as Dracula. His father went by the moniker Dracul, which means dragon, and Dracula.
And I believe Romanian.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say I was trying to remember which language. And so they believe that Dracula is son of the dragon because his father belonged to an order of crusaders called the Order of the Dragon. So that's where all of that comes from. Now, they fought for territories up and down the Danube River, and he was captured at a very young age. I wish I could remember the ages, but he was captured and he was held captive for I want to say 2 years. I could be wrong, but in a very brief amount of time, he learned the other language, and he learned the language of his captors, and his captors were creeped out by him because he was very, very perceptive, and he spoke their language like a native. That was just something about him. There's a reason he was called Vlad the Impaler, if you're not familiar with that being one of his nicknames. He would put these big pikes up in front of his castle, which was not gigantic, nothing like what you see in Castlevania or in the old, whatever vampire movie. You always see this massive castle. It was not huge. He was equivalent to not quite a prince. I want to say a duke. Yeah,
well, I mean, the difference between the two is nominal.
But there would be these other vassals that would come and visit him and pay tribute and whatever. And there was this one time where these two dudes came to visit, and one of them was clergy, and the other was some other countryman. And they're walking out among the front of the castle, and there's these people that have been put up on these they've been impaled through the chest up on these 10-foot spikes. They're just suspended up there. And he's like, what do you think of this? And the clergyman is like, God has chosen you as a punisher. God uses you as his hand to punish the wicked. And he praised him because he knew he was going to be in trouble. And the other guy was admonished him for it. He's like, no, this is disgusting. This is horrible. You're gross and whatever. And he's like, all right, bring another spike out, and he put that guy up right there.
Yeah. There
was another time where there was another vassal sort who came to visit, and they're eating dinner. And he had this hole in the floor, and he brought a pike, or whatever we want to call it, this impaling, log spike, is big thing. And he had it brought in and placed into the floor while they were eating, right there in the room. And the guy, and because he liked to play with people, and he then says to the guy who's there for dinner, he's like, what would you say if I told you that this has been brought in here to honor you? And in that, he meant, I'm going to put you on this spike. He understood, what he was saying, and the guy understood what he was saying. And the guy, understanding his reputation and understanding how to handle it, very slick dude, said something to the effect of, if this is how you choose to honor me, your judgment is best. Do what you must. I trust that you are wise. And, he totally lavished praise on him, and he complimented him, playing towards his ego and pride. And Vlad laughed at this and thought it was wonderful, and showered the guy with gifts and sent him home. So it could go in either direction depending on how you catered to his personality. But he was, ruthless. He was very intelligent. He was not just a psychopath, though one would.
Part of it was he was in a tough location where he was with the Ottoman Empire on one side and the Austro-Hungarians on the other, or might have just been Hungary at the time. I think it was just Hungary at the time, but. I remember one of the stories that I remember was actually he knew the Ottoman Sultan was going to invade because he had done something which he needed to do for his survival. Maybe it's when he retook the throne, or I forget exactly what. And as the Ottomans invaded, he literally created a forest of impaled people for their army to have to march through as they approached him to attack him. And he actually repelled them. And part of it was credited to, they were very demoralized.
Yeah, psychological warfare.
march through a forest of impaled people. And so I'm sure if you asked the Ottomans, they'd say 100,000 people were impaled. If you asked Vlad, we'd probably say the same thing, but it was like, who knows how many it really was.
Yeah, a couple hundred. Yeah.
Yeah, numbers in history are often lies that most sides agree to. Oh, there was like 1 million persons who attacked us at Thermopylae.
Yeah, Thermopylae.
Thermopylae was a different battle. And,
okay. I've read multiple books on Thermopylae too. For a good Thermopylae read, go pick up the book Gates of Fire, which is admittedly it's a historical fiction, but the author did a great deal of research, so it's a very accurate representation of what occurred and except
the problem being Persians did not write down history, Greeks did.
Right. Well, by accurate, I'll say accurate according to the history.
To what we know.
Yeah, according to what we know. And it was also a good representation of the cultures, which again, according to what we know.
What we know.
So Gates of Fire, really great book.
Probably know more than we did, but I believe, is it Herodotus? I can't remember.
Herodotus.
The father of history.
Yep.
He's also called the father of lies, I believe, too. So. Because he's definitely
I wasn't there for this, so I'll just make this part up.
I'm not going to go too more there, but let's get a little bit back into the world of darkness here.
Okay.
Essentially, the idea is the idea is vampires are the children of Cain. And
one of the coolest origins of vampires I have ever read. I love this origin.
And so essentially, his children were a little bit weaker. They were what they call second generation. And then there's like third generation and fourth generation. And I forget what generations you could start off with.
It depended on the campaign.
Well, I'm saying by standard rules, I believe.
Oh, it was like 9 or 10. It was
like 9 or 10, and you could buy it up a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah, it might even have been later than that.
The closer you get to Cain, the stronger your blood is, the more powerful you are.
Yeah.
And then if you get to a certain point, and there's a term that I know the new game uses, which I don't know if it's the original term, which is thin bloods, which is your blood is so thinned out, you're so far away from Cain. And the idea is Cain's children would produce third generation, and then their children would produce fourth generation until you get down to a point like around 11th generation or whatever, where your blood is so thin that the difference between you and a human is you're a little bit faster, but you burn up a lot quicker. So that's the basic idea of how the children of Cain work, and they have different clans, and we're going to talk a little bit more about clans when we get into talking about what is going to be in the game itself. But the interesting thing is, there are lots of clans, and I'm sure every time they come out with a new edition, and I remember at some point one of the clans I like to play was Gangrel. Because they were great at combat if you want to play a combat focused character, that's usually what I played when I played Vampire.
So just a quick aside on clans. Clans are kind of like the flavor of Vampire. So basically, if you're gonna choose one of these clans, you're gonna have some certain innate abilities, certain things that are kind of personality traits that are going to be very common in that clan, outlooks that are going to be very common in that clan.
And we'll get a little bit more specific on that when we talk about who shows up in the game, because I don't know how many supplements have been put out, but I'm sure there's a million clans at this point. But the idea is, the way I like to think about it is, clans are people who have certain, they're like races in fantasy games where they have a certain power set, and like Michael said, they are very much choose a certain type of person to become part of them, and they deal with vampires in a certain way. you also have a big thing is called the Masquerade. The Masquerade is not necessarily followed by all vampires. There's a group called the Gangrel and another group called the Sabat, which that might not be true anymore because I know the story keeps changing as they release new editions. But those were traditionally the two main factions, and the Camarilla enforced a thing called the Masquerade, where if you revealed yourself to a non-vampire, depending on how bad it was, you would get punished equivalently.
So the whole deal is like, we're vampires. Shh, don't tell anyone.
But the fear being if people find out about your existence, you get wiped out. There are other types of vampires who like to use fear and just murdering people instead, and that was the Sabat, or at least the way they were traditionally presented. And that's kind of the interesting thing is too, and I don't know how much this is still true. Typically, there would be in a Camarilla city a vampire in charge called a prince, and then there would be other people, and he would literally be the king of the city. In the parlance of people used to, he had authoritarian control and could make decisions. That doesn't mean he could necessarily enforce them. The thing people typically forget about kings and emperors is a lot of times they had unlimited power and their word was law, but if people didn't do what they told them to, they might not have the ability to force people to do what they wanted them to. So,
basically, if you arrived in a new city, like you go to San Francisco, at least in the games that I played, it was expected that you would go, their first stop would be going to the prince or his underlings and announce your arrival. Like, you don't show up in a city without letting the local hierarch know that you're there.
Yes. And now there was a higher level, and that's where the Camarilla were faction-wise. I think those are kind of broken down since the old school thing. So I would imagine the cities are still controlled by the most powerful vampire, at least the most powerful one flexing his muscles to do so. And up to a point, because at a point too, when they got really old, a lot of times they become very bored with the vampire politics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when they got too old, they would just kind of disappear as well for various reasons. But very cool. It's a very cool narrative system in which, at least when we played it, you need lots of 10-sided dice to play.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I did like about the game. Like, you didn't need a whole bunch of the math in the game was very manageable, and the it was not a complicated system. So it was quick to learn, which I think is one of the reasons it grew so quickly. Like, D&D got real complicated, but any of the White Wolf systems were very, very easy to learn. So it was very welcoming to new players and inexperienced tabletop role-playing gamers. And also, oh my gosh, I'm losing brain farting left and right here.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going. I don't remember my second point.
So Michael's second point is Jeff is great. Okay, so moving on.
No, it was something about the system. It was something about the system and the dice rolling, and that I remembered. Like,
I mean, it kind of grew into a burden in a way, because sometimes you need so many dice to do certain actions. That is typically a sign that you were playing just a power-hungry character, and not a very balanced character. But I saw I need like 300 10-sided dice for my attack roll. Oh, okay, good job.
See, I never played in games that were that powerful. I think the lowest gen I ever played was like 6th gen, and that was like for a very special campaign, and it wasn't for the whole thing.
Yeah, the only time I played a high gen one was actually as a kind of PC in someone else's game, and I was really much more powerful than the players, but they didn't really know it.
That's always fun.
But yeah, so the idea is you do have a sort of a high feudal system, or maybe even a low feudal system, that sort of a traditional power system for vampires, but they do try and stay outside of the realm of mortals because of numbers, and you can't kill them all because you need to drink some of their blood. So there are a lot of other details you can kind of get into that make it interesting. Vlad Tepes is actually a character in a clan that does show up in the game, but a non-player.
What's he?
Tzimisce.
No, I would have guessed. What's the gypsy one?
Ravnos.
I would have guessed Ravnos.
Really, Vlad?
I mean, just because that region of the world.
But remember, those people are from all over the world. There are gypsies all over the world, and they're all DNA connected. Or not all, but in Eurasia, they're all pretty much DNA connected. And actually,
so there's no reason he couldn't.
They started in the Baltic states. That's sort of the traditional power base of their caravans. But that's like way like BC probably. So there are Bloodlines. I know came out a couple years ago. I might end up picking the game up at some point just to check it out. I'm sure the price has been jacked up on it because of Bloodlines 2 coming out. So I'll probably wait. But it's supposed to be a good role-playing game with flaws. Story-wise good and a fun game if you can get past the flaws. The bugginess of it. And then Bloodlines 2 is coming out. There are currently trailers. I know a new one came out with E3, supposedly showing gameplay, which looks pretty cool. And it'll be interesting to see. It's always interesting to see where you get the games with the types of powers there are in the World of Darkness, how they deal with them. I'm sure you just don't use all of the ones that are in the books because it would be very tough. Be very tough to pull off all of the powers in the books.
Did you have a favorite particular power?
Obfuscate.
Obfuscate was good.
I liked that clan. Why don't we just skip there now?
Majesty was pretty sweet.
Majesty was pretty sweet too. But ironically, even though I typically liked playing political characters, I didn't play. Well, the first clan we'll talk about, we should have the Ventrue, which Majesty was one of their powers. And the idea with the Ventrue are they're about power through persuasion. It's force if needed. Don't get me wrong. No vampire clans are wussies when it comes to fighting, but the idea is they would use essentially charisma and vampiric powers. And I think the idea is the powers of Cain kind of got split up in the clans. So like Cain would have all of these powers. And which is also why the closer you get back, the too old you get, the too powerful the vampires become.
Yeah, when you start talking about anything above like Gen 8, you start getting to vampires that are so powerful, like they have to eat other vampires. They're done eating people because people are too thin. Like
they'll go into something called torpor.
Yep.
Which is the idea of
it's like a
hibernating.
Yeah, and it's said that the Methuselah, the Gen 5s, are like kind of like the Illuminati, like controlling the world, but from a state of torpor.
They're just that powerful. Yeah.
They're that powerful. And that's Gen 5. You got 4 more gens before you get to Cain. So you're talking some seriously, but it's also said that a lot of the generations prior to Gen 5 were wiped out. So yeah. And maybe Cain drank them all.
And one of the things too was if you ate someone who was of a lower generation than you would actually shift down towards that generation.
Well, and also if you drank from somebody more powerful than you would temporarily gain some of their powers, which was very cool.
So it actually, in a way, it kind of gave you a threat that you're powerful enough that you're more powerful, but you have to also have to watch out to make sure, because one of these people will drink your blood if they get a chance.
Yeah, it's a big no-no to drink another vampire. Like I forget what that term. Do you remember the term?
There was a term for it.
There was a term for it. It's like a big no. It's basically equivalent to cannibalism. Like it's a very frowned upon to drink.
Very frowned upon by the powerful vampires. Yes.
Well, just the society in general. I seem to remember the what were the bad guys? The
Sabbat.
I seem to remember the Sabbat did it a lot, and they didn't care about that rule.
Yeah, and especially like if they were attacking like people of the opposite sect, I know that was pretty much the de jure choice to do there. But let's see, story, but something about the age of the vampire being active too played into their need to drink a lot. So the actually physically older they got, the more they would need to drink, no matter what generation they were. And they'd obviously become more powerful too. So it leads to this torpor-like state for vampires when they get too old. And sometimes, a great story plug for World of Darkness would be a powerful vampire and people trying to prevent him from waking up for fear of that he just goes on a spree and eats everything.
Torpor could also occur from dramatic physical damage. Like if you got, your butt kicked, you could go into torpor as a means of staving off death.
Yes. And so Bloodlines 2, the Ventrue are one of the playable clans. The Malkavian, which is typically my favorite clan.
Oh, they're so much fun.
I very rarely
forgot about the Malkavian. As soon as you said the name, a bunch of memories flooded up.
I don't even remember their powers. But
just remember they're crazy.
yeah. Essentially, the flaw of the clan is you're actually insane. And everyone knows it because they know if you're Malkavian that you have to be insane. So it'd probably be very creepy to meet a Malkavian who doesn't seem crazy.
Yeah.
Because that would probably be unusual. And I don't really even remember the places. I didn't play them that much, but they were always integral to my stories. The Toreador, which were essentially I like to think about
royalty, like snooty,
snobby artist.
Yeah. Oh, artists. Okay.
Yeah, the Ventrue were the snobby rich people. The Toreador were the snobby artist, usually, and actually, I don't remember their powers too.
We should have looked up the powers so we could list them off.
the Tremere, I remember, were magic based. So they could actually perform. I believe it was blood magic, and. Very powerful.
Shocker.
I did not play with them really. They were always around, and they were always they're kind of associated, but they kind of stated themselves as well too. And the Brujah, or the Brujah, depending on who you ask, are a group. They were traditionally sort of like the warrior class of the world, but I think they've sort of delved more into anarchism as the years have gone on.
Yeah.
I remember their
very anti-conformist.
Was increased strength
and speed. Celerity was a big thing with the Brujah.
Celerity was Gangrel, I thought. So
also you that was a common Gangrel.
That's true because there were certain powers. I think
there was plenty of powers that crossed clans, but Celerity was popular with both of those two. It was very common.
Because those were two of the fighting clans there. And another group called the Thin Bloods, which is also playable, which is you're so far away from Cain that, like I said, you're pretty weak. And then there are some clans that are missing. At least they're not considered playable, which are notable, and that is two of the original clans, the Nosferatu and the Gangrel. And I know from watching the trailer that the Nosferatu were in there.
What was the name of? There was a specific clan that was a vampiric assassin clan.
They are also not playable. They were called the Assamites.
The Assamites, yeah. My buddy
have a newer name called the Banu Haqim, and it's probably mispronounced. I don't know how to say that. I put next to them that they were the Assamites because that's what they were traditionally called. There was another group called the Followers of Set, which are now called Ministry or the Ministry or something like that, which is kind of interesting. Maybe a cult like a new face for them, I guess.
What was the other one? Ravnos?
Giovanni, which are sort of mobster stereotype vampires.
Giovanni, yeah.
The name Brujah, which I don't really remember their thing because they were Sabbat, and I never got much into the Sabbat themselves. I usually like to have people be their own worst enemies, so I don't typically incorporate foreign powers.
Going back to the Assamites for a second, they were actually sanctioned and allowed to kill other vampire, and usually
they were neutral-ish.
They were usually sent by the Camarilla to take somebody out. Like if somebody was breaking the rules of the masquerade a lot, like you'd really have to be egregious, committing
and a serious death sentence and hard to get to.
Exactly. And they had a lot of like blood power too, where they, like one of my friends had one, and what he would do is he had short swords. And when he would draw his short swords, he'd drag them across his own stomach, which would lace the blades with his own blood, which would then do, was it aggravated damage, whatever is the term was for the game. Was it the game mechanic was it made it much harder to heal those wounds if you were a vampire. I'm pretty sure the term was aggravated damage.
Okay. There was another group called the Ravnos, which is actually one of my favorites. Actually, the only powerful character I ever played, my NPC-ish character, was Ravnos. I don't even remember his actual name anymore. Oh God, I can't remember. The thing was, Ravnos all have a con or a crime that they're attached to. That's sort of like their version of being crazy. His crime was he was a con man, and his backstory was he was actually 5th gen vampire, so he was very old. But he was put to torpor when the Romans crucified him back around 33 AD, he essentially was a con man who was playing Jesus Christ. That was his crime. Was he was coming as the savior. He got crucified by the Romans, which put him into torpor.
So was he Christ, or his con was that he was Christ?
Oh, he was the figure that people called Christ.
Okay.
Yeah. But he obviously was not. He wasn't even from the area, but it was just him, essentially doing his thing. When he got
okay. I'm trying to establish whether or not there was a Christ figure that the game acknowledged.
Not in Jim's game.
So he is what people thought was the savior. There was no other person within the world.
No, there was no other person.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
And he was the guy who got crucified, which put him into torpor.
Yeah, that'll do it.
He woke up around the times of Richard the Lionheart, and sort of came onto the scene in England. And I was actually adventuring with a group of people there in England, and but really he was a planted story by the game master, and I forget what he did, but he was there to betray people because he was a bad guy. But it was funny, and no one had any idea how powerful he was either, because they were all normal starting characters, and my character could have probably killed all of them, but it wasn't in his nature. But to betray them, for a crime, he would. So I think he might have been working. I think the story was we're trying to stop Prince John, or that's what the party was trying to do. We were Richard Loyalist, and now Clan Tzimisce, which I remember they did like body sculpting stuff. They were kind of gross. They're kind of what people think of as Dracula things. Although there was Brujah who could do body shaping, and they would do really weird things and deform themselves. The Tzimisce were kind of like stereotypical Transylvanian vampires.
One of my favorite, the Gangrel had these really cool powers that I liked that allowed them to, I think it was called Earth Meld, maybe. That might have been a stage of one of their powers, but you could, if you found dirt, you could drop into the dirt, and
it had to be natural.
Yes, it had to be natural dirt, and you could drop into the dirt, like literally, like think Kitty Pryde. You'd be part of the dirt, so you could drop into the dirt and hide from sunlight, and you could you could rest for the night down in the dirt. But if you upped that high enough, you could move through the dirt. You could like swim through the dirt, and so you could just drop into the dirt and pop up somewhere else. It was very, very useful.
Yeah, one of my characters, that was his main thing, was that.
But you'd always be dirty. It's not like you came up perfectly clean, which I kind of liked. It was like Gangrel are this very earthy, very natural, like nature bound sort of clan. So they're kind of grungy. They're kind of crunchy.
They're 90s hippie grunge.
Kind of.
Well, more grunge, which is kind of like a
grunge is a great comparison, because they did kind of have a little punk aspect to them, not a lot, but a little. So,
and they were sort of your loner, your sort of savage in the wild, but typically noble.
For extra credit, you guys could go look up the old television show Kindred. They actually made a TV show about all of this.
Really? It was World of Darkness?
The TV show Kindred was based on World of Darkness. It maybe did 2 seasons. It definitely did 1 full season. It might have made it into a 2nd season. But they did Gangrel pretty well. They did Brujah okay. I remember the guy they chose to be like the representative of Gangrel on the show was like, he is a really good, like visually, he looks like what I would think of as a Gangrel.
Yeah. Nosferatu were always interesting because they could hide, which is another thing. It's the scout in me. I liked Earthmelt. I liked, I'm with you. I don't know if those are stages of a power or their own line.
I'll tell you keep talking. I'm going to quickly look the
Nosferatu. Yeah, of course. And Nosferatu could actually, their main power was the ability to hide. Literally, you just couldn't tell they're there. And if you got powerful enough, interesting enough, I remember you actually make people forget you existed, which is something a lot of Nosferatu did when they got too old. They'd make everyone forget they ever existed, so they wouldn't come and try and eat them while they were asleep. So it's actually
and the other thing was that
they were sort of like from the Nosferatu movie. If you've ever seen images of that,
yes,
their appearance was the hideous version of vampire, not the more modern version of it being, Count Dracula.
Well, the thing that was cool about them is that they could hide in plain sight. It's not that they were good at hiding. It's that they could walk through a crowd and you wouldn't notice them, even though they have a very extreme visage. Like they all are like,
normal people would be frightened if they saw them.
Terrified. If you saw if you saw a pretty, like a super, super pretty Nosferatu, they would be like, 1 to 10, they'd be like a 5. That would be like the prettiest Nosferatu could ever get. Like they'd be like, a 1, a 2. They're horrible to look at. They're scary. Their faces are, messed up.
Scale too.
What's that?
Could be in the actual negative numbers on that scale.
Sure.
Okay. A few basic things before we wrap up here.
Oh, no. I'm going to get through powers. You keep going, but we're going to go through powers in a minute.
Okay. All right. We'll go back to that. It's based on the city of Seattle, which I don't know nothing about from the World of Darkness. Paradox Games is not making it, but they are publishing it. And I know they're very fan of expansions coming out for years afterwards for games that they actually make. So I'm assuming this game will be very similar in that, where even if the full price of the game probably won't be $60, but there will probably be a $4 to $20 DLC coming out every 6 months. They'll keep throwing content for years at their games, and I'm assuming this game will kind of go that way too. And I'm sure story pack wise, they'll create additional stories for it if it does well. It's supposed to be 25 plus hours of gameplay, and there's already some footage out there, and they're planning mod support as well too. So hopefully the community can help fix any of the mistakes that they make if you play on PC. But yeah. So you want to talk more about powers?
Yeah, like if this doesn't intrigue you to play a game like this, I know we're talking about the video game, but I loved the tabletop game, so I'm going to encourage you all to go
step back, and we'll do maybe even next time or shortly we'll do one more talking about the World of Darkness, and we'll get more specific into the clans and the powers.
I'm gonna mention just the names of them, and we will just mention some of the things that we remember. Fair? Okay. So Assamite, Celerity, Obfuscate, Quietus. Do you remember what Quietus was?
Quietus was like the thing that gave them their blood magic, I believe.
Okay. Brujah, Celerity. Potence, they would burn blood to make themselves physically stronger, which was always really cool once the fight started. Presence was their other power. They could make themselves be intimidating to others. Gangrel had animalism, fortitude, and protean, I believe, was the one that we really liked.
That was the earth meld one, and then
Yes.
the earth move, and there were some other things too. Yeah.
Animalism, you could like talk to animals and communicate with the animals
You could
eventually.
actually grow claws that would do super nasty damage to other vampires.
Oh yeah, that's right. That would also, growing claws would also
like to play Gangrel was just to get the claws. I actually preferred the protean, but the claws were definitely useful too.
I remembered loving protean. The followers of Set had obfuscate, presence, and serpentis.
I don't remember, but something with snakes, I guess.
I can look it up really quick, but
yeah, they're ones once again they were a Sabbat one. I sometimes use them as red herrings or black herrings, I guess is what you call them in games. So I never got that much into them. I like more the political infighting, and I like to bring it in strange things. Like there was a mummy source book. Oh my, mummies were insane.
Mummies were nasty. They were so powerful.
Yeah.
The Giovanni had dominate, necromancy, and potence. Lasombra, you remember the Lasombra?
Those were the guys who would like screw up their face. I remember is what they're special.
They had dominate,
which is like commanding people.
Obtenebration.
That's the face and body manipulation one.
Okay. Potence. Then you had Malkavian, which had Auspex or Auspex.
And that's where you just kind of see stuff. Yeah.
Demonation.
Demonation. I remember.
Yeah. Demonation. Obfuscate. Then Nosferatu had animalism, obfuscate, potence. Ravnos had animalism, commercery.
That's their crime one, I think. I don't remember.
Okay. Fortitude. Toreador. Auspex. Do you remember what Auspex was?
That's version of potence for people.
Do you remember what Auspex was? No. Because there's like four.
That was a cool one, but
there's like four more that have like three of them. Three of the next four have Auspex. So Toreador.
That's the one the Malkavians had.
The Malkavians did have that, yes, but so do the Toreador, the Tremere.
For people, so you can actually tell like, oh, that person's supernatural, that person's not. So it was kind of like it was a perception type of thing. It would enhance your perception. I think a level was like you could see like with eagle vision, and I could be wrong a little bit, but I think it was about your senses, I believe.
I'll tell you what, I'm just going to name the only two that are up here that we haven't named yet, which were thaumaturgy, which the Tremere had, and vicissitude. And
I don't remember that one, but I remember it being like nasty. Just the name is nasty.
I want to take a quick look at Auspex. I'm going to click on this real quick. Auspex is as much reflections of the curse of Cain as the traditional banes, as it can lead to the obsession with minutia and distraction from important matters from focusing on minor details. Also, higher, blah, blah, blah. Let's see what the power does. Heightened senses, ancestors' vigilance, raise one of your 5 senses, and perceive ghosts. So you can get your senses alert, but then you see things. Ears of the lie, so you can tell if somebody is lying. Artist's intent, you can learn the details of an artist's state of mind in relation to a piece of art. There's telepathy once you get up to level 4, a psychic projection once you get up to level 5, and spirit travel at level 5. At level 6, I mean, once you get into like anything above 3 is really powerful. So anything like
above 5 is impossible until you get to a little closer to Cain too.
Yeah, like some of these powers, like I'm not even going to bother reading because like you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be playing a game.
Like the Ashukate one where you can make everyone forget you ever existed.
Yeah, that's hey, no need to go find that enemy. He doesn't exist.
Oh. Who?
Bob?
Never heard of Bob.
Never heard of Bob. He just killed your mother like a minute ago. Like right over there. He's the ugliest man I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, some of the powers are ridiculous, and but it's
fun. Like it's so much fun.
A fun system, and it's a good way to explore the dark side, right? And that's kind of why the World of Darkness. So it's an interesting role playing game. I have no idea where the stories are at and all that stuff anymore. But I know it's still around, obviously, and if you want something different, a little bit more story driven, and try it out. It's a lot of fun. But especially look for Bloodlines 2 when it comes out, supposedly next March. However, they've now announced Cyberpunk 2077 is coming out in 2020, which is very fitting in April. And so I don't know if games that are too close to its launch date get moved. Because I have a feeling that, it's gonna be huge when it comes out. I think people think it's gonna be huge when it comes out.
Yeah, so everything that's come out for that so far looks really impressive. Graphics, story, interface, like it all looks really, really.
And all the video game provocateurs are attacking it hardcore, which to me means they think it's going to be popular, so they're trying to be provocative and get noticed through its popularity. So another reason not to get too worried when people do that, because they're just trying to get attention.
And Keanu Reeves is in it, so you can't really go wrong.
Well, I know their E3 presentation. That little segment of them was tremendously well done.
I didn't see it. I was only able to like read articles that talked about it. I haven't seen.
I'm pretty sure if you go to YouTube, you can get just their part because it's part of the Microsoft conference.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just really well done because it kind of went and then it came back with Keanu. It was awesome. It was very well done. And then when he came out afterwards, it made it even better. So,
yeah, Keanu Reeves makes everything better.
Yes. Excellent. All right.
We have sorry, go ahead.
For the world-building task, I'll let you take the world-building task here.
What would vampires look like in your world? So consider that. If they don't exist in your world, not saying they have to, but what would they be like?
What they look like.
And hey, go ahead.
The interesting thing is the vampires in World of Darkness were so well sculpted for Earth in the World of Darkness setting. I remember they actually came out with source books in GURPS. And I was really excited being a GURPS player, and I bought them to see if I could get them. But the problem is they only worked really well in that setting.
Yeah, they did not work well in the GURPS system. I remember having the Mage book for GURPS, and it was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like it just,
well, I mean, forget about the system side of stuff. It's just like the way they were built, the powers were really generated for the setting that they created. And a system like GURPS is universal. It didn't translate well where you could just pull out those powers and reuse them somewhere else. It just didn't feel right. Maybe because I knew it too well. I don't know.
That's the one thing with all the White Wolf systems, I will say, like, there's not there's so many different types of role-playing game systems out there. When I really started getting into tabletop, it seemed to me that most of them were unnecessarily complicated. Like Shadowrun was crazy complicated. D&D was crazy complicated. GURPS could be complicated, but you could simplify it, and it made a lot of sense. So a lot of the guys that I played with, we used GURPS for a lot of things, except any White Wolf game. Nobody tried to translate White Wolf to GURPS because the White Wolf system fit its world so well and was not crazy complicated. Like we just did not need GURPS for that game.
No, you did not need GURPS for that game. But yeah, think about, what are some of the powers, and are they evil? What would a vampire look like in your world? The idea is that they have to drink the life essence of the people there, and so what would that look like in your world? It's a good wargaming exercise, if nothing else. And now for a real world task, don't suck people's blood.
That should be an easy one to.
That should be an easy one this week. So do not suck people's blood in real life. Do it in video games. Do it in writing, but just not for real, folks. So I hope if you have trouble with that one, let me know so I know never to meet you. All right, everyone. A little fun in there. This actually went way longer than I thought, but yeah, we should almost split it up just because we got to talk about World of Darkness for a really long time. So maybe we'll reapproach the World of Darkness at a different time. So
maybe we break out the books, and maybe our next thing is, I know we've been talking about doing this Groundhog's Day campaign, but maybe we polish off some of the White Wolf and do like a miniature White Wolf thing.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the books anymore, though. I think I got.
Yeah, but you and I could probably when we get a couple character sheets, we could approximate.
Yeah, we could probably
like a one shot, one-shot adventure, I'm sure we could do. Because didn't White Wolf exist in Garduel? Like, wasn't there some White Wolf gaming that occurred in Garduel?
No. Like I said,
No.
I tried to convert it over, and it didn't feel right, so I dropped it.
Because I do remember playing at your mom's old house in, what was it, South Windsor?
Windsor.
I remember playing at a huge table, and it was a medieval setting, and it was a vampire campaign.
That was White Wolf's Vampire Dark Ages.
Oh, okay. I would give you credit for that. I would have been like, oh, that was a vampire Garduel adventure.
No, I appreciate it, but no, it didn't work because the way they're crafted, and maybe it's my bias from playing it, I don't know, but it didn't feel like it fit in my world. So, which is why the Worldbuilding Task is more important.
So, if you guys want us to do the White Wolf or the White Wolf like one-shot adventure before we do the Groundhog's Day multi-session adventure, hit us up on closed Facebook group, which Jeff will give you the address right now. I always mess up.
Facebook.com/groups/Undercroft.
And otherwise, have a great night. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.